So today we're going to hear from a really interesting organization that has been founded by the woman you'll hear from, Juliana Rotich. And in order to introduce her, I'm going to introduce Renee Boda. But I did want to tell you a little bit about the Estlow Center so that you know that every year we give an award to an outstanding person or organization who has made a contribution to democracy. And what we do is a team of faculty members from the University of Denver and media professionals work together to make a selection of people who have made some kind of outstanding effort. And we believe that Ushahidi is an excellent recipient of this award. They are being recognized for their efforts to utilize new media technologies in ways that help people share pertinent information during times of crisis. Ushahidi has been an important platform for citizen journalism, particularly in parts of the world where it can be difficult to get information quickly to people who need it the most. And so we believe that Ushahidi is filling an important need, and we're very happy to have Juliana with us today. And now I'd like to introduce the chair of the Department of Media, Film, and Journalism Studies, Renee Boda, who has actually done some work herself in Kenya, which is where Juliana is from, and she has worked with Kibera Project, and we'll tell you a little bit more about that, I think. Renee is chair of our department and also is a graduate of the University of Wisconsin-Madison, where she did a degree in mass communication and has a great deal of expertise in health, safety, and communication issues. So let me call to the podium Renee Boda. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I actually wasn't planning on talking about my Kibera project, but I'm happy to talk to anybody about that another time. And I wanted to give Juliana as much time as we can to have her talk about her organization. I will say that because I do work in Kenya and in Nairobi, I will say that her organization is incredibly respected there. And when I was there for 2 months this past summer doing work on my project, I was constantly running into people saying to me, have you met Juliana yet? Have you met Juliana yet? Have you gone over to Ushahidi? Have you gone over to their offices? And I unfortunately was just so busy with my project that we weren't able to hook up. And so I'm really looking forward to being able to do that in the future. And so the work that she's doing is just so well appreciated there by the Kenyans and by everyone that I came across while I was doing my work there this summer. But let's just talk a little bit more about Juliana Rotich. So as we already heard, she is from Kenya, and she is the co-founder and executive director of Ushahidi, which was named by The Guardian as one of the world's top 100 women. And she was named by Huffington Post as one of the world's 100 game changers, which is incredible. And last week they named her through their power list. So, and I couldn't agree more with their analysis of this. Prior to Ushahidi, Juliana was a data analyst at Chicago's Hewitt Associates and worked in IT for over 10 years. And so she brings that expertise to Ushahidi and the work that she is doing. She spearheaded environmental coverage for Global Voices Online, and was a contributor to Reuters environmental coverage. She has a personal commitment to using technology to address social problems by allowing people to share information with one another. And as Lynn already mentioned, in terms of Ushahidi, we know that that's exactly what she's doing with this project. So we're very pleased to have Juliana here, and we're going to be presenting her with an award a little bit later. But for right now, I'd just like to welcome her and bring her up to the stage and let her tell you more about Ushahidi. Thanks so much.
Hello, everyone. It is an honor and a privilege for me to join you today. I'll go right into it. There's a lot to cover, so I'll give you a bit of a background to set the technological context of the space that Ushahidi operates in. So in 2009, I had the immense pleasure of meeting Vint Cerf, one of the some people call him the godfathers of the internet. And it was really a great moment because when you start looking back into the fact that open source technology is really important to the growth of a lot of tools that we use right now, it's something that I'm often reminded of to look back into the tech that helped Ushahidi exist even before we knew what Ushahidi was. A previous recipient of the Anvil of Freedom Award, Ethan Zuckerman, the co-founder of Global Voices Online, He's also a board member and one of the key people who were very supportive of the idea of Ushahidi from the beginning and got us going. Mentioned that the internet is the most powerful tool created by humans to allow connection, collaboration, and understanding. And we've seen that come through in the work that we do, and also in the collaboration and support that we've had through Global Voices Online. Just to give you an idea, so the point that I'm trying to underscore here is we are on the shoulders of giants, and we're just building upon that heritage of openness and the heritage of technology that helped drive that impulse that worked in Kenya and continues to work in other countries. To give you a little bit of appreciation on the technological context in Africa, so this is a really interesting map that was created by Kai Cruz. If you just look at the scale of the African continent, so sometimes when you think of Africa, the ideas and the things that come to mind, let me just ask a quick question. When you think of Africa, what are the big things that come into your mind? Climate crisis, perhaps poverty, or really big problems. The point about this image is that it's an immense continent. If you look over to the right, India fits into most of East Africa, covering Somalia, Eritrea, part of northern Sudan, and into Kenya, and also into Tanzania, into Uganda. So this image just shows not only the size, but the potential. And with increasing connectivity, for a long time, the problem in Africa was not getting information in. We were able to get information in. It's just that the cost of connection and the cost of reaching out to the rest of the world was extremely expensive. When we started Ushahidi in 2008, internet penetration was 2.8%. When I had my mobile phone out in upcountry Kenya, I could only get a GPRS connection. For those who are just used to 3G connections, that's 2 levels down the type of connection you're used to on your iPhone or your Android smartphone. So things have since changed. This map shows the different fiber optic cables that now connect Africa. Now, these connections are important because the cost of connectivity is lowered, and the cost of connecting to the rest of the world and connecting to each other is lowered. So this is really important because a lot of, particularly in sub-Saharan markets, people are very cost conscious because you pay for every second. When you talk on the phone, we don't have pay-as-you-go. We don't have postpaid plans like we have here in the United States. You have to pay for every second. So cost is a really big issue, and connectivity has been a really big issue, and access continues to be a big issue, but things are changing, and they continue to change today. Like I mentioned, there's lowered connection cost. Just to give you a bit of context, it cost 4,000 megabits per second per month in 2009. That number is now 200 megabits per second. With more competition, we're seeing that number decrease even further, and we're seeing the growth of startups that were otherwise not there because it was just not financially or economically feasible. And to also give you an idea of the connectivity in Kenya, the GSM coverage, this is coverage on mobile phones, was very low in 2008 into 2009. Now in 2011, most of the connected areas, most of the cities have a cell phone base station. So I'll circle back to why that is important later in the presentation. But just to keep in mind that now, even if you go into the most desolate places in Kenya, you can at least get a signal. And that signal is really important when we start thinking about the capability of people to share a narrative of what is going on around them. And just a little bit more data on the connection costs. In 2006, there were 8 million mobile phone subscribers. Now there are 22 million. There's a growth of, by and large, the phones that are used in Africa, in many parts of Africa, are feature phones, very simple phones that have very simple functionality. However, we're seeing the growth of smartphones. The most recent, it's called the Ideos phone, that was created by a company called Huawei in China, sold out very quickly. And this was a very simple smartphone that costs less than $80. It sold out within a week. And it shows that there's this continuum of people using SMS, using email, and using smartphones. This brought innovations. For example, the if you haven't heard about it, it's called M-Pesa, and this is mobile money. This is a very interesting innovation because it allows people to transfer money very quickly and easily, and I can pay for my groceries using my mobile phone. I can pay for my cab fare using my mobile phone. I can send money to my relatives who are out up country on my phone. I think that is really instructive about the power and the transformational power of a simple device that can be in the hands of millions. This has the potential to change many different things, from healthcare, from governance, to education, to finance. We're just kind of scratching the surface at this point. And we really hope to see more innovations coming out of Kenya and East Africa in general. And I'll just go right into a little bit about Ushahidi. So Ushahidi means testimony or witness in Swahili. And it was the first prototype of a mashup. A mashup is taking a map and adding data, overlaying it over the map so that you have an idea of what is going on where. And give me just a moment while I play the video for you.
Imagine a way for people all over the world to tell the story of what was happening to them or around them during a disaster or emergency situation. It would need to be easy to use, something that almost anybody can do, and it would need to be deployable worldwide. And that's why we've created Ushahidi. Ushahidi is the Swahili word meaning testimony or witness. Born from the post-election violence in Kenya in 2008, Ushahidi kept Kenyans current on vital information and provided invaluable assistance to those providing relief. It was deployed in the Democratic Republic of Congo to monitor unrest. Al Jazeera used it to track violence in Gaza. It was used to help monitor the 2009 Indian elections and to help gather reports globally about the recent swine flu outbreak. Anybody can contribute information, whether it's a simple text message from an SMS-capable phone, a photo or video from a smartphone, or a report submitted online. Ushahidi can gather information from any device with a digital data connection. After a report is submitted, it's posted in near real time to an interactive map that can be viewed on a computer or smartphone. But the most powerful feature Ushahidi offers is the ability to take the core application and deploy it yourself to suit your community's needs. Since Ushahidi is open source, anyone can improve the service in any way they see fit. Our growing community of developers are constantly at work improving Ushahidi to bring it to as many people as possible, including working to bring native applications to today's most popular mobile devices. With Ushahidi, it's easier than ever to get critical and timely information to those that need it most on a platform that almost anybody can use. That's Ushahidi.
It takes a team to bring this type of technology to the world. Pictured there is our team of developers. That's just a subset of the team. When we have our team calls, we have about 8 time zones to figure out. And it's something that it speaks to the power of diversity because all these different people who contribute to the project from around the world bring their local experience and their local tech expertise, and that comes together into the growth of the Ushahidi platform and its cloud-based systems. Some of the ways that the Ushahidi platform has been used around the world is around election monitoring. And this is from the point of view of citizens. So for example, you could go to your polling station and you'd be able to report and say the polling station was open on time, or in the case, I was recently in Zambia, where we went to visit one polling station and the lids were missing from the ballot boxes. Such an egregious error that, you know, can make people feel that the electoral process is not working for them. People now have a voice. They can say, look, this is not working out here, and that can signal to the electoral officials to send the people who are charged with making sure that the process works to remedy the situation. Most recently in Liberia, the platform was used to crowdsource information about what was going on in Liberia. So I'll quickly play that.
Tense scenes during Liberia's recent elections. Though the vote generally passed off peacefully, it raised fears of a return to violence in a country devastated in the past by years of civil war. In a quiet office block in central Monrovia, a team of IT experts are trying to harness modern technology to provide a clearer picture of any unrest and an early warning system if and when violence occurs.
Ushahidi Liberia began in 2010, June 2010. We're here to create maps for organizations that are tracking conflict in the country. It provides the world with a way of seeing what's happening in Liberia according to Liberians from their perspective and in near real time.
Ushahidi, meaning testimony in Swahili, is a piece of open source software created by a group of Kenyans in 2008 to help track the violence which erupted after the country's disputed elections. Using emails and texts from witnesses, a map shows up-to-date information on when and where trouble is occurring, allowing humanitarian groups to react more quickly. In Liberia, as well as an election map, there's another to track general incidents of violence or insecurity around the country. John Kammer is one of the site's regular contributors.
Many persons are accessing the internet every day. So I think it is something very meaningful to help Liberia.
Mobile phones are virtually ubiquitous in Liberia, as in much of Africa. But while it is growing in popularity, the same cannot be said of the internet, and the team freely admits the project still has a long way to go.
Majority of the population cannot access the internet, so explaining to them sometimes may get a little difficult to understand. However, over the months we have been working, a lot of people now getting adjusted and can easily go to a cafe, the internet cafe, to be able to access our sites, to be able to get first-hand information.
A true African technological success story. Versions of Ushahidi now exist in more than 120 countries, mapping everything from art trails to earthquakes. And with internet use on the continent tipped to grow rapidly, projects such as this could feature increasingly prominently in Africa's political and social landscape.
There is a connection to Denver with the Ushahidi work in Liberia. John Etherton, one of our trusted developers, who also is part of the Ushahidi team in Liberia, his wife graduated from the University of Denver, and he's actually local here in Denver. And he passes his regards, and we wish he was here with us because he often is just working by himself in his either in his apartment or at a coffee shop, and wishes that he could connect with others who are interested in using technology for social good. So if you're interested in the work going on in Liberia, either from a research perspective or if you'd like to go there to do some sort of study, I'd be happy to put you in touch with John and to the rest of the team there in Liberia. The biggest lesson that we've learned from the work in Liberia is that the issue of access continues to be a problem, and that mobile phones continue to be a very important thing to design for as we think about reach and impact of using technology for civic engagement and for crowdsourcing information for different things. Other ways that the platform has been used is around citizen journalism. For example, there's an issue of sexual harassment in Egypt. And HarassMap was used to crowdsource these incidents to highlight the problem. And also, when there was the oil spill that happened in Louisiana, the LA Bucket Brigade used the platform to plot the effects of the oil spill, what it meant to the local fishermen, how it affected them. So it goes beyond the headline that you see on CNN that, oh, there was a major oil spill. But you're able to zoom in and figure out what that meant to the people locally. And over time, it gives you a qualitative view of what is going on and the cleanup efforts, and possibly could be used later to quantify the true extent of the damage. One of the ways that the platform has continued to be used around the world is around disaster response. When the Haiti earthquake happened in 2010, our team joined up with Digicel, a telephone company in Haiti, Instead, an organization here in the United States, Frontline SMS, and a few other organizations to crowdsource information about the Haiti earthquake. What we learned from that was that when you start listening to the crowd, it is possible that you could get very useful information that can then be acted upon by first responders, because first responders are overwhelmed by the information overload. And when you're listening to different channels, if you're looking at Facebook messages, if you're looking at Twitter messages, if you're looking at SMS messages, it can be a big challenge to sort through all of that information. And that's where the crowd comes in. The Haitian diaspora was able to help translate the messages from Haitian Creole, from French into English, and for that feed to be provided to the US South Command. And there were satellite situation rooms set up at Tufts University and different places around the country that people were able to assist beyond giving $10 here, $50 here to the Red Cross. People felt like they were able to help beyond the normal ways of assisting. And in Japan, the platform was able to be used to crowdsource information. So if you looked for radiation centers, because that was a big issue around the Japanese earthquake, if you search for radiation centers in Japan in Google Maps, you'll get static results. If you go to sinsai.info, which is a crowdsourced map of relevant information to the Japanese earthquake, there's a tab for radiation centers. And you can find out the locations because the map will change to show you those specific locations. That's really useful contextual information. And you can also get updated information because let's say a center is closed for one reason or another. You can get information from the crowd about where the nearest center is or what the current status of that particular location. That sort of talks about this idea of collective intelligence and the ability for the crowd to look at data, to add to the data, and possibly to think about possible solutions to the shared problems that are there. So just to give you a quick idea, in 2009, we had a handful of deployments. In 2010, August 2010, we set up a cloud-based system that lowered the barrier for people to use our technology because that was one of the biggest challenges, that you needed to be technologically savvy to be able to download the platform, put it on a server, get it customized, and get going. Now, we provided a free service that was then able to be used for actually by small organizations, individuals, and even media organizations. The Australian Broadcasting Corporation was able to crowdsource information about the floods, the earthquake in New Zealand. They were able to crowdsource information about that. And to circle back about that idea of SMS, they were able to reach people in rural areas where you do not have internet access. Again, because the lowest common denominator and the device that people now have is a simple mobile phone. And that continues to be the case, whether it's a so-called developed country or a developing country, these challenges still exist. Since then, we've grown substantially. In April 2010, we had about 4,000 deployments, and right now we're looking at about 20,000 deployments in more than 120 countries. And mostly that was powered by crowdmap.com and a few other big deployments. We've got mobile phone applications that help you discover sources of crowdsourced data in your proximity. For example, if you downloaded the iPhone application for Ushahidi, you'd be able to see how many deployments there are here in Denver that you can contribute to. If there isn't one about the issue that you care about, you can set one up very quickly on crowdmap.com. So one of the biggest lessons, and this is something that I'm reminded of when I think about Kevin Kelly's rubric, which he lays out in the book, What Technology Wants. And he talks about this idea of the technium, that technology is but one part of thinking about the way we use technology. So there's the actual hardware, but then there's the people and the processes and the community that happens with technology. And that is mirrored a lot in what we see in the different deployments of Ushahidi, that with the base platform free and open source and easy to use, and so people do not have to start from scratch, the key thing that they have to think about is their goals, their objectives, and their strategy of using crowdsourcing technology. So there are still a lot of challenges. We're just starting to scratch the surface of what's possible with crowdsourcing. And in Africa, we're starting to scratch the surface of what's possible around technology. There's still some challenges around infrastructure. For example, bandwidth is still very, very expensive in Nigeria. There are problems with mobile phone providers because they often have to carry 4 phones because that's like, for example, in US, saying you would need 1 phone for your AT&T, your family members who use AT&T, another phone for your family members who use Sprint, another phone for the family members who use T-Mobile, because there isn't interoperability. And then there's also problems with downtime, because one signal, on one line you could get a signal, on the other line you may not get a signal. So these are the challenges that people are dealing with. And we also have an enduring problem with power. So we've got blackouts. Power is still a really big problem, not only in Nigeria, in Kenya, in Uganda, in different countries. And I think like I said, we're scratching the surface of what's possible. There's still these problems, but we keep working towards a future where we can have more innovations. And that can only happen that can happen faster if we think about how we're using open source and how we're sharing the knowledge that we've got here. And another idea that also underscores and underpins the work that we do with Ushahidi is collaboration. It's really important to be able to think about the things that we are involved in that touch on technology, but are not just about my iPod, my iPhone, or my this or my that. You can think about what causes that you care about. If you're into tech, that's fine. If you're into journalism, that is fine. But really, what are you contributing to that touches on other people's lives and touches onto other communities? And I think that underscores the goal for Ushahidi to create applications that help people to collaborate beyond borders. One of the key ways that the platform was used was around the Egyptian election. There was a gentleman called Farid Bushra and Kamal who had been using the platform, and they had translated it into Arabic. Now, what is interesting about how the platform was used in Egypt was the way they were able to contextualize the information about the civil resistance, the next step of figuring out the constitutional amendment, because there was a process around that, and then the next step of elections, which just concluded a few days ago. What gives us, this gives us a clue that you can have the collective intelligence of gathering data, but also contextualizing it and archiving it in a way that makes sense and gives a timeline of a revolution and into perhaps a democracy. We're yet to see the outcome of that, but this is a very gratifying thing for us to see, that if you create a platform, people can use it in very different and innovative ways. And that's just a little bit more of the deployments that happened around the world. And like I mentioned, it underscores the idea that people can figure out what's going on. I'll give you a quick example. When there were fuel shortages in Kenya and in South Africa, people were able to quickly crowdsource information of where they can find fuel or where they can find cooking gas. That's simple, useful information, and we just found out about a great deployment in Afghanistan that crowdsources information about commodity prices. And this is useful information if you're an Afghani about the price of diesel in one area versus a price of diesel in another area, or even the price of labor in one area versus another area. If you're looking for a job and you want to be paid the best possible rate, it gives you an idea of what the landscape looks like. This also points to something interesting that we saw in Russia. The idea that there was a deployment around the Russian fires, and what was different about this deployment was the fact that it was a matching of the people who are adversely affected by the fires and people who are able to assist. So that also points to the idea that we can work towards collective problem solving, as it were, beyond just gathering data. And like Renee mentioned, there's an area called Kibera. This is a quick animation of an OpenStreetMap mapping of one of the biggest slums in Africa. Before the mapping happened, when you zoomed into a Google map or OpenStreetMap or Bing map or whatever map, it was basically a hole in the map. You wouldn't get any context of what that area was about. Now, after the mapping happened, the community mapping happened, you're able to get context of community centers, of areas where women have reported that it's a security issue. Don't go there during certain times because it's dangerous. The community is able to inform itself about its state. And obviously, it's not a static thing. It's dynamic, it changes with time. And they were also able to create voices of Kibera, that they were able to tell stories about where they live. And so the idea and the view of the slum or Kibera as just this hole in the map is no longer the case. It's a community, a vibrant one that contains young people who care about their home and they want to make things better. The question is, how can you engage with them to make things better? So building on what we've learned, one of the biggest challenges we dealt with was information overload. Clay Shirky, when he thinks about the proliferation of social media networks and the many sources of information, famously said it's not information overload, it's filter failure. So looking forward, in some of the tools that we're creating with Ushahidi. There's a technology we're calling Swift River, and it'll be a tool to help journalists to gather information from different sources and to make sense of it in a very easy way, but also to invite the crowd to help them curate and to find the signal from the noise. Because if you're listening to the crowd, a trickle of information can quickly become a flood. So what are the next generation of tools, of open source tools? Because Palantir and all these other big companies have billion-dollar budgets to deal with big data, the challenge of big data. And for journalism, it's become important to start thinking about the tools that you need to complement your journalistic skills, but the tools that you need to deal with massive amounts of data, because that's how things are right now. So we're working really hard with different organizations and different universities, and how you can be part of this is to, one, try out our tools and see if they work for your issue, or if you're in the computer science program, it's open source and freely available, and you can tweak it however you'd like to do that. And if you're in the data science, it's a really growing field right now, the data science field, where you can use natural language processing and different algorithms. Those are specific skills that can come in handy for the network. So beyond just Ushahidi, we've got a physical space in Kenya, in Nairobi, and I look forward to welcoming Renee when she comes back next time, because it's a really great place to connect not only with the Ushahidi team, but the growing startup culture that is happening in East Africa with Kenya as the hub. And I'll stop there. I'll be happy to take any questions. Thank you very much. It's really an honor to be here with you.
Here. Thank you very much for your talk, and I have a microphone that I'm going to be able to bring to those of you who have some questions. I think one of the things that Juliana and others here would need to know is that I do have a number of students from my class who are here, and we're learning a little bit about communication history, and we've been talking about the relationship between media and messages. And especially one of the things that strikes me when I listen to Juliana talk is that, and in the university setting today, we often separate those things, separate media and message. And we think about preparing journalists or people in strategic communication by thinking of them as people who design messages. And I think that traditionally we also have divided things in the university setting. So we have computer science in a different field entirely, and then certainly business as something completely separate. And what Juliana is doing with Ushahidi is representing a way in which those fields and others as well are merging together and creating a new model for us about what it means to be people who are able to inform others and participate in public life through communication in new ways. So I'm very thankful to have Juliana here, and I want to open up the conversation to those of you who are in the audience, if you have some questions for Juliana about her work, or particularly about Ushahidi. And is this on? Can you hear me? No, okay. You can probably hear me anyway, because I'm pretty loud. Okay. Okay, so now the microphone is on, so let's hear some questions.
I'm just wondering, for example, in Haiti, when you're trying to crowdsource information of people who are in the process of being affected by, in that case, an earthquake, how do you get the word out to them about how to send the information about where the problems are?
Sure, that's a really great question, thank you. One of the first things that we did with the situation in Haiti was we partnered with Digicel. And they were really gracious enough to also help us with radio advertisements, because a simple SMS does not contain geolocation information, it doesn't contain latitude and longitude. So when the simple SMS comes through, it has to be processed in order to pin it on a map. That way when that feed goes to a first responder, they can approximate the location. So radio continues to be very important in different parts of the world. And also newspapers. For example, when we did a crowdsourcing project around the Kenyan referendum, and as we prepare for the Kenyan elections this year, we're working with different foundations to fund a media, basically a PR budget. You have to think about good old classic PR. When we started with Ushahidi in the first prototype, we were very fortunate to get a short code that was really easy to remember, but that was mostly viral. It went word of mouth, first starting with the bloggers and people who are networked and people who are mostly using the internet. But really, for different deployments now, we greatly encourage them to think about an ad budget. Yeah, and that's an opportunity for organizations to support those deployments.
I see Gigi, so can you stand up?
How do you differentiate between like what reports are true and which are false? I mean, I know people wouldn't like want to falsify like what's going on during an emergency, but just how exactly do you do that?
That's a very good question, and that talks about verification. What's the verification process? So number one, we've put out guides on our website on community.ushahidi.com, and there's a guide on verification. So the dots on the map that you see, they just don't show up automatically. They go into an interface in which the administrator of each deployment can go through each message to ascertain its veracity, whether it's true or it's not. We've designed the system in a way that you can see a cluster of similar reports in that particular area that can give you an idea of whether the information is being corroborated or contradicted. Then you can make a decision, and we also have a grid that you can pick and decide, okay, is this a report from a direct actor? Did they witness this directly? Or is this from an unnamed source? The other component of verification is the administrator of each deployment needs to be able to be well-versed in the local context of the application of the technology. I'll give you a quick example. In Sudan, the platform was being used around the elections a year ago. And there was an influx of reports from one IP address. And when you looked at the reports, they were trying to favor a certain party, and it was the incumbent government party. And the particular the deployment administrator was able to look at the messages and go, oh, well, I know who's sending all these messages, and I know why they're trying to send these messages, because they understood the political climate and why somebody would try to game the system. So it's really important to have that local view of an issue, because then you're able to pick out what makes sense and what doesn't make sense.
Hi. As you mentioned, like Ushahidi is well respected in Africa, and since it's growing bigger and bigger, and now, like you mentioned and showed us what happened in Japan, people are going to be able to view that. And my question is that, like, is there the Japanese people that reported the message to Ushahidi, or like where did you get the source from, or if those sources are from the let's say radio and newspapers and the other thing, how is Ushahidi different from Google Map or the other place? That you can just find, like tap in radiation center, and then the map will show you where those radiation centers are.
Okay, if I understand your question first, the sources of reports into sinsai.info came from Japanese citizens who were able to indicate locations of radiation centers, and they're able to indicate the effect of the earthquake and the extent of the damage. The difference between Ushahidi and Google Maps is, first of all, Ushahidi gives you the option to use whichever maps as the back end. Google Maps is one option. The other option is OpenStreetMap. In fact, the map in Japan uses the OpenStreetMap interface in the background. And then you can also use Yahoo Maps or Bing Maps. And that gives people choice because different mapping services have mapped the world in different areas. And I heard about a statistic that only about a third of the world is mapped. So there's really a lot more to represent the world as we see it on the digital devices that we see. So OpenStreetMap is a really great way because you can add locations very easily. Google Maps, it takes a while for that to be processed, or until there's a Google Streetcar that comes and maps the area for you. Yeah, so, and then, I'm sorry, what was the other part of your question? That's it? Okay.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I was curious your relationship with any Chinese citizens and if you're able to, I guess, penetrate the web availability there, and I guess what your future plans were in terms of accessibility.
The platform, thankfully, has been translated into Mandarin, so that we think that's a key first step in providing the technology to Chinese organizations who are interested in using Ushahidi in their work. However, as you know, China is a bit of a walled garden, and with the Great Firewall of China, it's really hard to know what's going on inside of China, but it's really an opportunity to use the platform to crowdsource information for different issues. So let's take, there's a big opportunity to use the platform around environmental issues. The South China Morning Post in the Singapore area used the platform to crowdsource information about environmental degradation, toxic waste dumping. So that was really, really encouraging, and we'd like to see more. And in that particular case, it was used as a platform to inform journalists on things that they need to be following up on. So you could see incidents, and then as a journalist, you could look through and figure out which ones bear further investigation. So that remains a really big opportunity. Right now, I cannot say for sure that we've seen more. It's just it's a tad harder to figure out if there are people using the tool there, and if they would be blocked by the government, or if they would be persecuted for using the tool. It's yet to be seen. As a long-term goal, we're not focused on a specific country. Fundamentally, we're a platform builder, so we will focus on making sure that the platform can be translated into the various languages. That's part of our strategy. The other strategy is making sure that the platform is available to be used on different mobile devices. And the other part that we're working really hard is to try and get agreements with mobile service providers, because short codes are very, very expensive to get. And yet, that channel of mobile participation can be most impactful. That's where we're really focusing our work. And then also the part about having a curation component of dealing with information overload. We're putting more of our focus on the tech. We also have a community director. Her name is Heather Leeson. She's Canadian, who helps us do outreach to different countries and organizations to help sensitize them to that big lesson around technology just being 10%, because you also have to think about the strategy. What we can do best is provide software that people can then use, mold, change, and adapt to their local use. We'd love to be in more countries than we are right now, but we're a pretty small team. I think the best way to add value is to provide the best software possible for crowdsourcing. Does that make sense? Yeah.
I was wondering if you could speak a little bit about the financial back end of all this, the business model or sources of funding, since this has been one of sort of the biggest challenges for some new technologies in making them at the same time accessible but also sustainable in financial terms.
Absolutely. So one of the key things that I'd like to mention here was when we started, we had zero funding, zero. But the key lesson in that, when we look back, is that prototype and figure out what you can make when you have zero funding. Who are the people that you need to work with? What type of skills can they bring to the table? And with that, you need to come up with a prototype. With that prototype, you can then show other people. Because it's really easy to have all these ideas, but sometimes you just have to show what's possible, and then people will start seeing the potential, and that's exactly what happened. People started to see the potential, and a few months later, we got the support of Humanity United, the Omidyar network that was set up by Pierre Omidyar, the founder of eBay, with his wife Pam, the Knight Foundation, which is an organization that is geared towards journalism and new media, not only supported our work with Ushahidi, but also continues to support our work with Swift River, because they see the potential and the usefulness of the curation tools that we're trying to make. Another organization that's been really fantastic has been the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation, whom you'll probably recognize from the nods that they get on NPR, which we love. And beyond that, in terms of the business model, more than 20% of our current operating budget is funded by additional revenue from value-added services. These are specific deployments where the Ushahidi team is contracted and paid to handhold throughout the process. And we will be continuing to try to grow that business and also to find sources of revenue through crowdmap.com to complement the foundation support. Or if I may add, also Ford Foundation just came through this year, and they've been really supportive because they see the potential of it being used by human rights organizations from Saudi Arabia to Syria.
I'm curious if you're able to track contributions to the to your site, whether it's SMS or online contributions, internet, and as a result, if you've had any acts of violence, if like outside sources can track this, and if you've had any acts of violence or aggression towards these contributors, specifically during election coverage or anything really, and how you would deal with that.
Because each particular deployment it has to be contextualized. So if you're acting in an area like, let's say, Libya, we do not go there alone. We work alongside organizations like United Nations Office of Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, and they have the local context and the local staff that can tell you, look, if you're going to crowdsource information, one of the key things you have to do is anonymize the phone number. So first of all, even on any Ushahidi deployment, the phone number of the person who sent in a message is not displayed. And it can also be anonymized in the back end, so even the administrator does not have access to that number. It can be scrambled. That's number one. That protects on the web interface. However, you cannot control it on the part where, let's say that person reported on their mobile phone and went off walking and went partying or whatever, and somebody stopped them and said, could I have a look at your phone, because sometimes you could be searched. that's where civic education of activists and people about safe use of mobile is really important, particularly in areas where you have censorship and problems like that, because they need to be smart enough to not only delete the message, but also delete the logs. It can be really tricky, and this is somewhere, this is a place where actually I think there could be a little bit more design help in how phones are designed, because some phones leave traces of information that people can still find out. I think it's sort of like CSI, but for mobile phones. People do these things, but you know, there are ways and tools that people can use on their mobile phones to keep their phones secure. That's really a big opportunity to use our technological skills to provide these anonymizing, even encryption technology. It's really important to start thinking about what if you could encrypt messages end to end. There's a gentleman called Dr. Clarence Tan who's developed some technology around that, but it's hard to get it to a usable form on all devices, because I'm sure you know, if you just think about Android and how many different versions of the same OS are available. Sorry to be technical, but I'll stop now being technical, but it's part of what we do, yeah.
A few more questions?
Hello.
Hi.
Do you know of any notable instances in which Ushahidi has been used as a source for journalism worldwide? And considering that, what do you think the implications are for the journalism industry because of this software?
One of the really great examples that ties into directly with journalism is in Panama. You can look it up on, I think, PBS Idea Lab. Just search for Panama and Ushahidi, or just do a Google search on Panama and Ushahidi, and you'll see a quick story about that. What's interesting about that is, I think, how it ties into journalism is, one, journalists can use the Ushahidi platform as a way to aggregate different sources of information, right? That's number one. Number two, they can use existing deployments as a way to find the breadcrumbs of what the next story could be, and the beginnings of evidence towards a certain story. Like I mentioned, the South China Morning Post used it in that way. So that's the opportunity there. And then another example is a very recent one that was set up by Singularity University students called corruptiontracker.com. This is a very ambitious project. How it progresses is yet to be seen, but the idea is that what if people can report incidents of corruption worldwide? What sort of conversations could you have when you start seeing incidents of corruption pop up in so-called the West? What kind of stories could that lead to? So I think we're just starting to see some of the early ways that journalists could use the tool. But it underscores the journalists' role as curators of information. So you gather all this information, you curate it, and they're also sense makers. They make sense of it, they contextualize it, and give us some historical background of the issue. So many people think that journalism is sort of, I actually think it's a very important role that continues to be much needed now and into the future, because God knows how much information we process every day. We still need journalists to help us make sense of all this.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I was wondering if Ushahidi can be used, if say you send an SMS message with like a cross street, can that be then mapped onto like a Google Maps and then the GPS coordinates extracted from that?
There's a new system called OpenGeo SMS. You can just check it out on blog.ushahidi.com. Right now it's only on Android. but there's actually the possibility that you could embed latitude and longitude information in an SMS.
Well, yeah, I know they can do that through the GPS coordinates in a smartphone.
Yes.
But I'm saying if, say, you were to give a cross street, like High and Evans, and then, so like we have High and Evans right there, and if we had an earthquake here, and I send my text message that there's 10 people trapped in a building at High and Evans, could you take that High and Evans data, put it on a Google map,
Automatically.
from the Google map, get your GPS coordinates, and then send those out to a first responder?
That's exactly what we'd like to do. That's precisely that's the functionality that we provide with the smartphone applications that we have for Android and iPhone, and we will have one for BlackBerry very soon. That's the exact functionality that we provide.
Well, we'll hope that we don't have an earthquake at High and Evans anytime soon. But I did want to ask you, Juliana, if you could tell a little bit about the story, and particularly about the Kibera story. Can you tell us how that came about, that map? Was it something that you initiated, or was it something that came out through some people who were interested in developing it? And then how were you able to work with them? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So in early 2009, at that time I was program director, and one of my key roles was to find alpha testers for our very first version of Ushahidi. And we wanted to work with NGOs who are on the ground doing important work. And we were introduced to Carolina for Kibera, a local organization that was doing some work in Kibera. And we said, look, we'd love to help gather information about what's going on here in Kibera and to highlight your efforts. And we looked at the map at that time, nothing. They gave us a PDF map that showed the different areas, but you can't really upload a PDF map onto an online interface. It's really difficult. You need tile maps, and we tried to get that information. We couldn't get usable maps. Later that year, Mikkel Maron of OpenStreetMap heard of Ushahidi. He was a big fan, and he really liked the fact that you could switch between Google Maps and OpenStreetMap. And he actually flew to Kenya with his fiancée, and we started having mapping parties. And what we did was, along with the community, we went around with GPS devices and basically annotated on they call them walking papers. Okay, so this is the community center, this is the area where you can get clean water, this is that. And over time, I think it was 15 days of mapping, that animation that I showed. So those are the tracks that the team was walking through. And within 15 days, you had a hole in the map have a bit more context. Let me see. If you just go to mapkibera.org, you'll be able to zoom in clearly and see the different spots. But Mikkel Maron, Emmanuel Kalla, who's part of the Ushahidi team now, and Jamie Lundeen, and many community members in Kibera actually were instrumental in making that project work. Yeah.
Oh, yes.
I guess just to blow your horn a little bit more than that, I just want to say that I work in my project is in Kibera, and the people in Kibera really, really appreciate. I mean, the people that I work with aren't actually using this for themselves, but they view this as a way for them to get their voices out to the world, to the rest of you, to all of us, to be able to see exactly what is their community about, to understand their community. They're very, they see, that there are a lot of people talk about and describe Kibera and have a description of what is there and what is not. And I've spoken to a number of people who have told me that they appreciate the opportunity to get their voice out and to be able to have impact in terms of what is their description of what is going on. And so, you know, Map Kibera is one way to do that, to show where, you know, so that people can look at it and see, you know, where are the bathrooms and how few there are in that community. But also for, in terms of elections and what's going on with the election violence. There is an election coming up, and I know that a couple of people, when I was just there in December, were talking about you know, wanting to be able to get their voice out to talk about what is actually happening, as opposed to descriptions that some media are doing, talking about, you know, the violence that's happening. So I just want to say that it also provides an opportunity for people to have their voices be heard by the rest of the world, and so I think it's an additional important piece.
Thank you. And I was able to pull up the Voice of Kibera mapping, and this just shows that there are activities and things that are happening within Kibera that are trying to help. And I think it goes back to some of your work, because I'd love to see some of that highlighted in this particular map. And this is just a citizen journalism project that was done also with Map Kibera. And it just shows the day-to-day activities that happen in that area. They've got music festivals. Bonga Storiako is colloquial or Sheng, which is an amalgamation of Swahili and English. And Bonga Storiako means tell your story. But you know, this is I think it's a really great way of really highlighting the things that are happening there. From their own perspective, and not so much from other people's perspective. This is a really interesting one, turning trash heaps into businesses. I think that's, you know, so you see some positive things that are happening there, and I think that's really inspiring to hear, and for people there to know that that's what's happening.
Do we have one last question? Oh, I know. Now I've put the pressure on you. Who has the profound last statement they need to make? Okay, so I'm going to make sure that we all have time after this to have a chance to interact with Juliana a little bit less formally. We do have some cookies and lemonade out in the reception area, but before we do that, we always like to give our honoree an award. So if Juliana could come down here, and Ed and Charlotte Estlow are here to present Juliana with the Anvil of Freedom Award. So it's this lovely little statue here. So, sure, yeah. Do you want to say something? Yeah. All right.
As a University of Denver student 71 years ago, I finished expressing myself physically against the University of Hawaii football team. And I also want to say that that was an expression of communication. I was also connected with a media business for 40 years. And I want to say thank you, Juliana, to you today for re-educating me in the field of communication. And so in recognition of your work in the freedom of communication, I'd like to present this award to you today. And thank you very much for educating us.
Jill, do you need us to, do you want us to pose for this? Okay. So come on back up again. Now we're going to do this for the camera. Okay, come on up, Ed and Charlie. Renee, would you come up and be in the picture too?
I'll stand by.
All right, thank you. And that's an old media moment for you all.
No releases.
No releases, that's right. All right, well, thank you all very much. And join us out in the hallway so you can talk a little bit less formally with Juliana. Thanks for being here.